Hi, good evening, everyone, and welcome to On the Vanguard Conversations with Women of Color and Non Binary People of Color in STEM. We are so excited that you are here. I am Dr. Jedidah Eisler. I'm an astrophysicist by training. I am a little bit out of my I don't know. Today I'm feeling very high energy. So just be prepared for that. And let me pass the mic to my amazing co-host.
Hello, my name is Anika Harriet. I am the Chief of Comm Dev here at Vanguard STEM. I am also a biochemistry and molecular biology PhD candidate. I am also excited and maybe a little nervous for the first time on one of these shows today to be sharing a little bit of my expertise as a biochemist in talking about what we know about COVID-19. And before we get into the conversation, I also wanted to give a shout out to Geraldine Ezeka, who is our social media coordinator at Vanguard STEM. Geraldine is out there doing all of the live tweeting, monitoring the YouTube comments for questions. If you do have any questions, you can tweet at Vanguard STEM or you can comment below. That's why we stream live. And we'll try to get to any of the questions that you guys have with our experts here today. With that being said, it's also absolutely necessary that I share with you our virtual code of conduct. So the Vanguard STEM team works very hard to build all of our spaces, to host original content, including shows like this. So hello, if this is your very first time joining us, but we wanted to also share with you our guidelines about respect for our space and expertise and our community. So we just want to make sure that you understand that by entering what we call the Vanguard STEM hyperspace, you're agreeing to respect the presence of all of the other individuals convened into this space. No self-promotion, no shaming, no silencing, none of the isms or phobias that folks might experience in places that aren't this hyperspace. And also please know that if we feel that you're abusing or misusing this space, that we reserve the right to kick you right on out. Hopefully that won't have to happen today, but just know that we do monitor all of the engagement in our platforms. And with that serious business out of the way, I'll turn it back over to Jedidah.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. And let me just say, we are so excited for today's episode. As a foreshadow, you heard that our co-host, Anika Harriet, is a little bit nervous, and it's because she is doing a thing that we hope that you will all do from time to time, which is inhabit both her STEM identity and her STEM interests by being co-host on the show and co-creator of VS and all the stuff we do on that side, but also as a PhD candidate in biochemistry and molecular biophysics. Did I do it right? I'm always learning.
Biochemistry, molecular biology.
Molecular biology, I was so close on the last one. So close. Anyway, so we're really excited to have her as an expert in her scientific role these days. So on to today's episode. We are incredibly excited. I think we're both a little nervous, honestly, about this episode. It's very important to us in a number of ways. The first is because it's one of our information forward shows. We've been known to do shows about all kinds of stuff, but every so often we really like to touch base and level set on what is going on around us. And right now, you cannot avoid COVID anywhere in the world, and certainly not in this country. And so we wanted to gain insight from Black women in particular who are leading the charge on COVID vaccine understanding and discovery, on COVID vaccine distribution, and then on the health impacts and equity impacts of the distribution of the vaccine. So if you've seen our flyer, then the title is Black Women's Work, COVID, Black STEM Women's Work, COVID Recovery and Research. So, we want to talk today about COVID 101, like what is it? How do we understand it? We want to talk about addressing racial disparities in the distribution of vaccines, in the creation of currently available vaccines. There are 3 currently available in the US. Some conversations around data tracking and the like, and really just trying to understand what the total process of putting a vaccine into the hands of, or making available the vaccine to everyone in the country, what that whole distribution system has to look like and what goes on there. So we're really excited about today's episode, and we want to make it something that you can learn from, but learn from the perspective of Black women who have STEM expertise, both in terms of their work in the lab with a future doctor or proto doctor from the astronomy parlance, Anika Harriet, and later on our guest coming up. So that's what we're trying to demonstrate again, is this notion of STEM hyperspace. So without further ado, what we want to do is start with our co-host slash first esteemed guest, Anika Harriet, and talk about, you know, the STEM background, the biochemistry, the molecular biology of COVID and what it is, how it works, how did the vaccine we just want to know a little bit more about that. So Anika, I'm going to start out with a real easy softball question. Can you talk about what COVID is scientifically, why it's so contagious and why it's so virulent?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to jump too far ahead of the rest of this conversation, but I do think that I might touch on a bit on the different strains of COVID a little bit as part of that virulence. But one of the reasons that COVID is so contagious is that it stays in the air longer than viruses like the flu. And so I think that something that we've all seen is a shift in how people interact and go about their daily lives now, as opposed to this time last year. And so I know this time last year, lots of folks would not leave the house without gloves, lots of sanitizing their groceries, and things like that, that we don't necessarily see as large of a population of folks doing anymore. And a big part of the reason why that's the case is because at this time last year, we didn't necessarily have the same understanding of how contagious and virulent COVID was, how likely it was to be transmitted from surfaces like doorknobs and elevator buttons, or lingering on the surface of groceries, versus what we typically see with respiratory viruses, where it's passed through coughing, sneezing in the air, and all of those other reasons that we definitely should not be leaving the house without face masks on. But yes, it does linger in the air longer than the flu, which is one important reason, like I mentioned, why it's important to stay masked up. But I do think along with that, is important to point out that this year we have seen decreases in the number of folks who are infected with the flu, which, if nothing else, shows that maybe we should be taking some of these precautions all of the time. When we talk about how contagious these illnesses are, we're learning that these practices that we put in place to stop community spread are specifically for COVID, are preventing the increase in illnesses that we see this time of year, or in the winter, with diseases that we pretty much come to terms with everyone just getting. And so I think that really talking about how COVID is spread and transmitted, and its particular virulence, we can learn a lot about maybe what we should be doing for other diseases, that maybe we shouldn't just accept that you just might get the flu. So yeah, that's definitely something that's important to point out. But as we talk about that, again, we talk about the variants as well. And I know that that's maybe something that is, again, jumping the gun, but I think that that is the question that is on everyone's mind as we talk about COVID. And so I will say that we have to remember, I guess it's sort of, in my field, we take it as a given that any microorganism, so bacteria, viruses, and whatnot, have the ability to mutate. So the fact that we're seeing the COVID virus mutate is not something that's surprising to folks in the biomedical research fields at all. But when we talk about the importance, again, of protecting ourselves and our communities and all of those practices that we have in place, this is why. So the way that these microorganisms mutate is that they are mutating based on the host cell So we see COVID mutations popping up because so many people are getting infected. And so this is why it's important when we talk about folks who are asymptomatic, not only spreading it to vulnerable populations, but that is how these mutations crop up that alter the virulence of COVID. And that virulence can be altered because these even single point mutations, something that's critical to my thesis, is this concept that everyone is fairly aware of, which is form follows function, right? So when we talk about mutations, we're changing the form, so to speak, the literal DNA that's encoded in these viruses, and then that creates new functionality. So it changes certain shapes of the virus and its ability specifically to enter cells. And so when we talk about a strain being more contagious or more virulent than one or the other, that's really what we're talking about, is how easy that cell is able to be, that virus is able to enter into host cells, and those other aspects of the functionality of the virus itself that crops up when we see these mutations. Because viruses adapt in the same way that any other species would want to adapt for survival. So the virus is always trying to get one step ahead of your immune system. And that's really what we see when we talk about different levels of virulence or how contagious those viruses might be.
Oh my gosh, that was so helpful. Thank you so much. So if I'm understanding you correctly, basically what happened was we had this virus, it spread rapidly across a large population, that is to say the planetary population. And you're saying that in general, when viruses spread, they're going to have these mutations because it spread so much. I guess the rate of mutation is higher, and so it's happening faster. Am I understanding that correctly?
Absolutely. And so that's one of the reasons why we talk about getting our flu vaccine every year, for example, because like I mentioned previously, we kind of just accept the flu's going to go around. It was nothing more than a year ago to go to work if you had a sniffle or a cough, and no one would think twice about it. And those practices lead to higher rates of infection, higher mutations, and that's why we have to scientists think ahead and try to plan for the flu vaccine to be the form of the virus that they believe will be most prevalent in the population at a particular time of year, just because we know so many people are going to get it. It's going to mutate. It's a given, or at least in our previous lives,
right?
It was a
before
given.
times.
Exactly. Yes. Pre-COVID era. Yes, BC, before COVID. So yes, exactly. Those rates of mutation are higher because the rates of infection are higher.
Okay, that's super helpful. I am going to pretend like I'm doing this for our viewers, but truly, I'm learning so much. So thank you for that. Let me ask you a question then about, I understand now how variants work. Thank you for that. We'll leave that for a second. Can we back up and now talk about the vaccine in particular? And when I think of that, I think of Dr. Kizzy Corbett and like all the work she's done, and how amazing that is to have a Black woman that was with Dr. Fauci and talking all about these things. But can you just walk us through, like, what does the vaccine do? What is so important about it? How did it happen so quickly? Can you just walk us through the vaccine process?
Absolutely. So this is my chance for a shameless plug for my graduate fellowship, the Meyerhoff program. Dr. Corbett was a Meyerhoff scholar. So, that makes me feel like a little special too.
Love it.
Yes, and we were able to have her as our guest speaker for our fellowship retreat last year, which was also an amazing opportunity. Kind of like, we knew what was hip way before everybody else. But that aside, yes, I definitely would love to talk, especially about the vaccine development and how that was able to happen so quickly, especially because I think outside of the scientific community, that's an aspect that really concerns folks, is that this virus has only been around for so long and we're already through trials and vaccinating folks. And so I would just like to explain first that science is often very slow. And it's not slow because of lack of ability. It's often slow because of lack of funding and resources. But when we have a situation like COVID-19, we're allocating all of our best minds like Dr. Corbett and experts, and most importantly, the money to solving those important problems. Exactly. And so when we talk about the timeline specifically for COVID, it is pretty incredible. It's an incredible feat, not something to be afraid of, that we went from December 1st of 2019, this last year did not happen, December 1st of 2019 being the first documented infection of COVID, that now December 11th of 2020 being the phase 1 vaccination beginning for healthcare professionals. That is the science that we all dream of. And so definitely not a reason for folks to be afraid. So we had, yes, that December 1st, November-ish, first unpublicized, publicized, documented, however you'd like to speak to it, documented COVID-19 illness. By the following month, the actual viral DNA was sequenced, and that was crucial because once that is sequenced and available open access to immunologists and virologists around the world, then everyone's really able to get their pens to paper and start solving this problem. So it only took a month for us to get to that point. And then within 5 days of the virus being sequenced, actually Dr. Corbett's team at NIH began working on their mRNA vaccine in collaboration with Moderna. 3 months after that, they were beginning their phase one and two trials. By May, we had Pfizer and the BioNTech trials beginning, and so on and so forth, to the point that by around Christmas time this year, we were able to start seeing folks being vaccinated. And I know personally at my campus, by late January, folks who were not directly healthcare professionals or emergency folks were being able to be offered the vaccine. So just that process of development really is something that is amazing, and not something that we should be wary of in that context. The one caveat to that, of course, is that there is an emergency use authorization in place for the COVID vaccine, because some of those studies were not able to take the longevity trials or go fully through the rigorous sort of trials that we typically would anticipate before a vaccine is released to the public. And so that being said, we'll talk with our guests later about some of the concerns and folks and how we can deal with that as well-informed citizens. So yes, and then you also asked about how this vaccine, the vaccines work. So I can talk to that as well.
Yes, let's have you do that. And I know we need to bring in our first guest. So I'll have you start, and then I think we'll bring in our first guest, which might help with this, and have you take over for them. So why don't you start the conversation? And then when you feel like it's a good moment, feel free to have your bring in your guest. Let me just say one thing though that I think is worth noting about this point that you were making about like timelines, and the fact that like even though it was rapid, both in terms of the having the emergency, you just said it and the words are escaping me, but like having this emergency process, but also having the funding is actually it's a big positive rather than something to be wary of. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. And I think it's part of the scientific method that's not necessarily always clear to folks, is that like getting to do the thing at the time that you need it when you have the resources is truly allows for transformational change. So yes, why don't we have you, like we said, start with the answer, and then when you're ready, bring in your guest.
Absolutely. So I'll talk about the nitty gritty of how the vaccine works, and then we'll bring in this guest to talk about what I'm sure folks are maybe a little more interested in hearing, is how you get that COVID juice in your arm. So yes, the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are both mRNA vaccines. Again, specifically want to talk a bit about this because it's something that is new to the general population. So I will say this because I said it when we were planning this show, and why I felt like I could provide a little bit of information about this is that the idea of mRNA and what it does is not a new or novel concept at all. I joked with you a little bit backstage that, day one of my graduate biochem courses, we learn about mRNA and talk about how to use them in vaccines. And that is maybe an exaggeration, I'd say, of maybe 1 to 5 days. So we know what mRNA does, and we clearly understand it. So mRNA was discovered in around the 1960s. So by 1990, there were proposals of using mRNA vaccines. In 2009 was the first time an mRNA vaccine was injected into a human patient. In 2017, we had the first test of personalized mRNA cancer vaccines. So when we talk about some of these longevity studies that folks are concerned about or being concerned about receiving mRNA vaccines at all, I want to let folks know that there's a long history of mRNA vaccines that spans over the course of over 60 years. And of course, I pointed out those specific time points of interest, but there is so much research that went into those processes all in between that lead up to the fact that, again, the vaccine, the viral DNA was sequenced on January 10th, and by March 16th of that same year, they were already beginning their trials because we know this technology very well. So mRNA, what is mRNA? So this is what we call the central dogma of biology, which is that in this process of your genetic material, there is DNA, which is transformed to RNA, and then that becomes protein. And so your DNA, I like to think of as sort of the library of all of the things that make up your body or that make up an organism. So that viral DNA as well. The RNA is the specific instructions for a particular thing. So you think about this library. Your DNA is in all of your cells, but of course we know your skin cells are different from your muscle cells, your stomach cells, etc. All of those have the same DNA, but what makes them different is the activated RNA, which then gets translated into the protein, and the protein is what does all of the things. So your DNA is the library. We can think of the RNA as the specific instructional manual for something, and the protein is, once you follow those instructions, what do you get out of it? So that's how I like to think of it. I think is a pretty simple way of explaining something that is far more complex, of course. And so when we are talking about these mRNA vaccines, what we're giving to patients, I'm not giving anything to anyone. But what patients are receiving are the instructions that are then translated into their cells to produce the protein on the surface of those cells that your body will recognize as something that doesn't belong there. So it's the specific protein that will be recognized as the COVID-19 virus. And so it's essentially teaching your body that that's something that does not belong. And so then if you are infected with COVID-19, your body doesn't freak out and panic and send you into all of those awful cases that we hear of folks who spend months in the hospital, et cetera, may pass. But instead, your body says, oh, I remember you. You were here a couple months ago, and we're not having that here, not in my house. And so your body then is able to know that and kick out those viral particles. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is different than the Pfizer and Moderna, which are mRNA vaccines. The Johnson & Johnson is the type of vaccine that we're used to seeing more typically in the clinical setting. It is a adenovirus. It is not No one's injecting you with something that's going to make you sick, but it does work in very much the same way. And just teaching your body to recognize what the viral, what the virus looks like, so that if you are infected with it, it knows how to fight it off. And that's the important part of it. Is it's not, you're not immune. Your body just knows what to do. And I think that now that I've given the set of information for what the what the vaccine does, we can talk about the vaccine itself a little bit more in the patient setting. So let's bring on that first guest.
So excited. I know you're about to do the whole thing, but I just want to say that I am so excited about learning from you in this way. I'm all like, oh wait, I forgot we're on a show. I should be paying attention and doing all the things. So like, thank you for running us through that. I feel so much more informed. And so, yeah, so let's bring on our guests. Floor is yours.
All right. Sorry, I thought we might bring her on first. Yeah. So our first guest is Lieutenant Commander Charlene Reese. She is a nurse in the United States Navy who has served 23 years and is currently stationed at the Naval Medical Center in Portsmouth, Virginia. We are going to be speaking with Lieutenant Commander Reese from New York. She is currently deployed in support of FEMA and the state of New York as part of the DoD's COVID-19 vaccination team in Queens, New York. She is a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy Nurse Corps. She is a mother, and she's my mother, actually. So I am thrilled to have her on here and to share in this community and conversation with her. Hello, Lieutenant Commander Reese.
Hi, how are you, Anika? I am so excited to be a part of this conversation this evening, and I'd just like to take the opportunity to say thank you, Janata, for the invitation to participate.
It's a pleasure. We're so happy to have you and to learn so much from you, Lieutenant Commander Reese. So thank you for giving us all of this wealth of information.
Hello, Lieutenant Commander Reese. It's a little, got to get used to saying that. So I just spoke a little bit about the differences between the vaccines and sort of what they do, what they are. But I would love to hear from you about what you're currently doing in the state of New York. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what goes on at your vaccination site specifically.
Sure, absolutely. So we're here, and when I say we, the Navy, the Department of Defense, has sent us here in support of the whole of government approach to vaccination. So it's a state-run facility with FEMA federal support, and our facility is in Queens, New York, and we are at York College. And at that site, we have the capacity to vaccinate 3,000 people daily. We have a team of about 139 active duty members. 39 of those members come from a very unusual team. They're not clinical or medical. They are our mobile dive and salvage team unit, but they're here providing us with administrative and logistic support. The rest of the team is clinical, and we provide the vaccination for the patients. We are utilizing the Pfizer vaccine. And so what I've found very interesting is that a lot of our patients are coming very well informed about the different choices they have for the vaccines. But one thing is for certain, there is additional education that we provide in reference to the side effects that they could experience, especially making sure that they're knowledgeable about the severe side effects that could occur, even though it's very rare and a very small percentage of people have severe side effects. It's just important that they are informed and understand just what to look for with those types of side effects.
Thank you so much for giving us a bit of a clear picture of what you've been seeing at your vaccination site, I wanted to jump in. I maybe should have done this a little earlier, but you spoke specifically to the patient education aspect of that. And so I just wanted to share really quickly something that the folks who come through your site see very often, which is you welcoming them to the site and providing them with a little bit of on-site patient education. And so I'll just play that, the intro to that for some of our audience. So here we are. Hopefully you'll be able to hear it all.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant Commander Charlene Reese, and I am a Navy nurse. I'm here in support of this New York State FEMA vaccination site. I will provide some patient education regarding the Pfizer vaccine today.
So for the folks who maybe are tuning in from New York, this is where you might recognize that voice from. So I heard you say that you have the capacity for about 3,000 patients at your site. Is that typically the amount that you see come through?
You know, I'm happy to say that we've had a very good turnout. We arrived on the 20th of February. Our site opened on the 24th of February, and we see 2,800 to our maximum amount was over 3,100 in a single day. Our doors open at 8 a.m. every morning, and we're open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And so throughout that period of operation, it's a very steady, continuous flow of patients coming in.
Wow. I know that hearing that really does make me feel great, because knowing that that number of folks are coming through every day makes me feel like life might return to, hopefully not exactly the way that it was before. I think we've all learned a lot over the past year, but definitely to know that we'll be able to see our loved ones and enjoy some of those BC before COVID activities again. So can you tell us a little bit, I guess now on the patient education side for our audience who maybe will not have the pleasure of hearing your wonderful patient education video, what are some of the side effects that you talk about to patients who come through?
So really what I focus on is directly out of the emergency use authorization. And I'm certain that you discussed that a little bit earlier on in the conversation so that people could have a better understanding of actually what an emergency use authorization is. So we begin our discussion by just describing what an emergency use authorization is for clarity and full transparency. And then we continue the conversation with the patients in that standardized delivery method by just talking about some of the most commonly reported side effects via the CDC. And some of those things that people can experience, and it can be experienced after the first dose or after the second dose, is just fatigue, overall just feeling wiped out after being vaccinated, headache, muscle pain. There are reports of chills and low-grade fever, comes with joint pain, but specific to the injection site, we have reports of injection site tenderness, maybe some swelling and redness at that site. And what we typically will offer is just use a cold compress or an ice pack at the site to alleviate the discomfort that may be felt. And also with the other side effects, if the patients feel as if they need to manage it with medication because of the symptoms, they can utilize any over-the-counter pain medication that they use on a regular or normal basis. So your Tylenol, Advil, Aleve, and the recommendation is just to follow the directions that are on the bottle.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great to hear. I know I've heard a whole host of symptoms across the folks that I know who've been vaccinated, from literally nothing. Folks planning to take a day off from work and not really needing to folks feeling like they have a little bit of a cold. So it's great to hear you break down some of what we can expect. So my next question then is, how do you advise your patients after they receive the vaccine? Is that something that you talk about as far as patient safety and concerns regarding the regular community guidelines that we've been informed of for the past year before folks were readily able to receive the vaccine?
So I want to touch on two things in that area. So immediately after receiving the vaccine, our patients are maintained at the site in what we call our recovery area. And for most of our patients, that's about 15 minutes of self-monitoring, where we have nurses such as myself and some of my other colleagues that kind of will make ourselves available and roam throughout that recovery area, just keeping an eye on the patients for any type of reactions. And when I speak of reactions, those would be the severe but very rare reactions to the vaccine. And we make sure that we tell them exactly what we're looking for so they can know what to monitor themselves for as well. And some of those things for a severe allergic reaction would be difficulty breathing, swelling of your face or throat, a rash that will cover your entire body, or sudden dizziness or weakness. Another thing that we will discuss with them is just having a rapid or fast heart rate. And so I find that if the patients know and understand what those signs and symptoms are that we're looking for, then they can kind of help us out. And they're instructed that if they feel that way or they feel as if they need any medical attention, to just simply raise their hands. Now, our patients who have a more complex medical history or a history of any severe allergic reaction, including those patients who carry an EpiPen for allergies that they have, we ask them to remain in our recovery area for about 30 minutes of observation. And we have on site ALS and BLS EMT support. So if we need to transport patients for another level of care, that's available to them. So it's really important that we kind of establish that partnership, even though the relationship is really new and short-lived, that we have that partnership with our patients so that they understand the reason and rationale behind having to stay in the recovery area. It makes them feel a lot more comfortable when they understand what's going on and the why behind the ask. Now, as far as how we're advising them in the community itself, well, as you all know, with us providing the Pfizer vaccine, it's a 2-dose series. Dose number 1 is given, and then dose number 2 follows 21 days after. And so the recommendations is that they continue to follow all of the protocols set forth by the CDC, so that they're able to continue to protect themselves and others against the COVID-19 virus. It is something that I hear often in a question asked, oh, now that I'm vaccinated, can I just not wear a mask anymore? Can I transmit the virus to other people? And the reports that we've received from the CDC does state that you can still be a carrier even after being vaccinated, as well as you can still contract COVID-19 after being vaccinated. One of the great things about the vaccine is that it lessens the impact of the symptoms of COVID-19 should you contract it. And also those who contract COVID-19 after being vaccinated are not hospitalized. Those symptoms are such that they can manage them at home without hospitalization. And so really that's what we're trying to move towards in vaccination and this entire process. And this is a whole of government approach in reaching our administration's goal, which is now 200 million Americans vaccinated in 100 days.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Double it up. Why not? I love it. Lieutenant Commander Reese, you are giving us so much information and so many facts. It's just like, it's so helpful and so informative. So thank you so much for that. I have a follow-up question about some of the things you said earlier, and just personally, thank you for talking about the additional concerns about EpiPens. That's a consideration I need to keep in mind. So that's good for me to know in the process. And the other thing that really struck me about what you were saying is that there is so much patient education that once you get there, you're sort of told what you can expect, because, you know, I can only speak for myself, but I'm obviously, as soon as I'm able to get a vaccine, going to get one, but I don't know all the intricacies of what I expect my body to do, both because I have an anaphylactic allergy, but also because this is not my area, right? And so to hear you go through all of those potential side effects is really helpful. And I know then that means that there is a difference in time for how people move through, but I was just curious if you could talk a little bit about, like, you know, once a person shows up at the front door, like, how long does it take them to walk through the process?
That's a very good question. Thank you for asking that. At our site, I am very proud to share that, you know, we have a process that we've put in place that runs so smoothly that the average time for our patients, once they arrive on site, to the time that they're actually vaccinated and in the recovery area is approximately 15 to 20 minutes. So essentially, our patients walk through the door, their appointment, because our site is appointment based, is verified or validated, if you will, and then they process through what we call our education center. And we have the video that we saw a small clip of, which its entire length is a little bit over 3 minutes. And they all receive that educational brief. Once the educational brief is completed, then they are directed to our vaccination pods. And we have approximately 36 pods open and running every single day. And our patients then are vaccinated, and then they transition over to our recovery area. And so from front door to being vaccinated, that's what happens in that about 15 to 20 minute time period. And depending on the size of the crowd, it actually can be completed in about 10 minutes.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, I am loving all of this information that we're receiving and able to share with our community. And I definitely just wanted to emphasize a couple of the points that you made specifically that I didn't get to touch on, talking about how these vaccines work. So that emergency use authorization, and the folks that maybe have a little bit of concern around receiving the vaccine and what all that might mean. I think the goal ultimately of this show and some of the other aspects of what we have hoped to share with our community is really just about being informed, and that patient education is so important. So knowing that after you're vaccinated, you should still be following a lot of those same guidelines. You may be able to safely visit. I know that the CDC says that you can visit a single household, not gather for a full COVID party, for example, should still be masked, and some of those other things that you've shared. But that there are still communities that are part of this emergency use authorization that were not part of the trials, rather. So women who are pregnant, hoping to become pregnant, lactating specifically, in regards to the community that we serve as Vanguard STEM. And so I definitely just wanted to emphasize that part is the patient education is truly the most important so that folks can make an informed decision. I know that, again, as a biochemist, I hear a lot of folks who maybe have some hesitancies that sound a lot like things they just heard other people say. Definitely not something that came from any sort of professional's patient education or a rather informed expert. And so I really would just want to add that encouragement to our community, whether it's in asking questions in the comments, tweeting at us, or finding other folks in the VS community that we've maybe highlighted in the past and shared over social media to touch base with and just reach out to and ask those questions. One particular thing that I hear very often that I didn't get to talk about in my what does an mRNA vaccine do is folks who are concerned that the mRNA will change their DNA and what that might mean. I hear that a lot. I just want to say that is not how that works. And so I talked about kind of what the mRNA does, what it is. But I did just want to touch on the fact that when the mRNA instructions are incorporated into a cell, mRNA is also something that's incredibly fragile. And then your body already has processes to digest it, get rid of it. And so that's not something that we really are concerned about as far as that is, or as far as your DNA goes. When we talk about things that change our DNA, that sounds very big and scary, but there are lots of things every day that change your DNA. Sunlight will do that. And so I definitely appreciate Lieutenant Commander Reese and the patient education that she was able to provide for our community here today. Definitely wanted to emphasize those points that she made about safety, efficacy, the emergency use authorization, and specifically some of those other concerns that only an expert would be able to speak to. But I do know that we had another guest who we were very happy to welcome to speak about her work today. And so I would definitely love to talk a little bit about that with you, Jedidah.
Yeah, so why don't we say thank you? Oh, yes, let's say thank you to Lieutenant Commander Reese. That was actually my fault, not hers, for the work she did doing patient education. Thank you, Anika, for so handily managing that section. So we had a guest from COVID Black, Dr. Kim Gallen, that we were hoping to have on to talk about health inequity. She is having a personal situation that she can't join us today, but we are definitely going to get in touch with her and have that episode offline, and we'll present it to you recorded probably, or if we can get her live, we'll do that too. So that conversation is not done. We're just putting our finger on it just for a second because we want to make sure to have the robust full conversation with another expert in data science and health inequity that we can. So as you saw, we spent a lot more time with Lieutenant Commander Reese and understanding her work with the Navy. And now we're going to bring on our next special guest. We're so excited to have them in the building, Professor Chanda Prescott-Weinstein, who is our VS Gets Lit feature book club author for the month of March. I almost forgot what month it was, but we are so excited to have Dr. Chanda Prescott-Weinstein in the building and to share her wisdom with us. If you don't know, Chanda wrote, right, in stereo, Chanda wrote The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey in the Dark Matter, Space-Time, and Dreams Deferred. It is your whole life on the inside. So if you don't have it yet, you should get it. And we wanted to make sure to have like all of the conversations with Chanda, because she is, if you don't know her, then I don't even really, let me not say anything out of the way, but you will get your life learning from Chanda. So first of all, Chanda, thank you so much for being on the show.
And thank you for having me.
Of course. And thank you for writing this book. So we're going to get right into it because we are who we are and we're a little bit late all the time. So let me just ask you off tops, real talk, what made you want to write this book?
Yeah, so I have to actually give credit to my agent, Jessica Pappen, because she reached out to me. I had been writing a lot online. I had been writing a lot for free, and we can talk about that. I've been doing a lot of free writing on my blog. And Jessica said, like, look, there's an audience that's not seeing what you have to say because it's appearing on your blog and occasionally in publications. And this is an opportunity to actually put together what you've been writing and put it out in a book. So that was actually the original idea, and that was what I proposed. The book that I wrote is a very different one in some sense from what I just described to you, because in a lot of ways, writing is how you find out what you think. And in some sense, what I thought and what I wanted to share with the world revealed itself to me as I sat down to do the writing process. And so I originally thought this was going to be like a collection of things that I had already written that I maybe cleaned up a little bit. And anyone who's familiar with the stuff I've written online will see pieces of that in the book. But it's really, in a lot of ways, a completely different thing. So that was kind of, I learned about what I wanted to say to the world through the process of writing.
I love that. I love that. It makes me think of, Toni Morrison talking about, like, if you don't see the book you want to write it. And it seems like it's even a more profound thing than that, because yes, you did that, and thank goodness you did. But it's also that, like, it's like your book saw you through your writing. So it's almost like you needed all of the other writing in order to get to this. And that's a really profound thing.
Yeah. I mean, just one of the things that I want to say in response to that also is that we grow, we change, we come to understand things. I feel like this is maybe something you identify with. For a long time, I thought Sojourner Truth said, "Ain't I a woman?" And at some point I learned that was, there's a whole like white feminism thing happening there with people assigning that mode of speech to someone who spoke Dutch as a first language and was from New York and was not from the South. And also the stereotypes about how Black Southern women at the time would have talked, all of that, right? So the other thing is that this gave me a chance to go back and revise, because we are not static people and we are changing. And I just, I think if anybody's out there who's thinking about, like, I want to be writing, I want to be sharing, it's hard in this environment where we're tweeting things and they're there on Twitter forever. We're blogging things. The blog is out there. The archive has saved it. It's okay to grow and say, actually, I don't think the way I thought when I wrote that 4 years ago anymore.
100%. And honestly, we need that, right? Like, we need the space to try something out and say if it works or it doesn't, and then remedy our situation. And in fact, when we're thinking about our work as scientists, the three of us on this call are all scientists, right? Like, that's literally what we do in our experiments is, we try something out and something breaks and then we try it again, So I really appreciate that. I wanted to go back to that point you made about free writing versus writing for your book. I think that's a really important point. And what it makes me think of is what I view as the tension between, like, having a platform like Twitter or Medium or all of these other places where you can write for free, so you can say something out there and someone can resonate with it, versus the fact that that's still a lot of effort to write these brand new transformative things and not being compensated. So I don't know, I want to give you room to run there. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, God, there's so much to say about that. But I think there are a few things, which is one, particularly the topics that I was writing on Medium about were very much, digging deep into my own experiences as a queer person, as a Black person, as a person from a poor working class background, from a labor family, about the challenges that I had experienced as a scientist. And I think almost at points like begging people to care about the things that were facing the communities that I'm a member of. And I really I just want to emphasize that word begging, because there were really moments when I was just like, please read this and please just be different. Like, I'm begging you. I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm tired, all of that. And there's a way in which that work got consumed by people who then cited it in NSF grant proposals and all of these things, that it becomes profitable for other people to have read the work. And so even though I have a really complicated, to say it politely, relationship with capitalism, there is something there about what happens when we provide that testimony for free. And then other people are going off and building off that testimony. sometimes they remember to cite you. A lot of times, like cite Black women, there's a reason that that movement exists, that the Cite Black Women, that Kristen Smith was inspired to start the Cite Black Women Collective. And it's not just like white people won't cite us, but sometimes we're not doing a good job of citing each other, right? And there's a way in which like a book gives you kind of a vehicle and legitimacy if you get the right editor, which I did. Katie O'Donnell at Bold Type Books was the ideal editor for this. And so it's not necessarily about like, I need to make bank on because I didn't. I'm almost certain that if I count the hours, I got paid below minimum wage to write this book. So nobody's getting rich off of this. But there is an element of, there has to be like a value placed on the work. And the other thing that I want to say about this is that in writing it in book format, then I sent the book to, I think like 15 people who read all or part of it and gave me feedback on it. And when you're just out there tweeting, when you're out there blogging, things happen, you say things, you make mistakes, you forget to cite someone that probably you should have cited. And this is an opportunity to take the time to do the work with care and with community.
Yes, Shonda, do the work with care. Yes, 100%. And let me just say that like part of the reason why I love that even before you get to like whether money was made or not, because I'm also here for you making money. Like capitalism is broken, I get it, but I'm also here for you making money. Like I'm here for extra money for like massages and whatever else you want to do. So I'm here for that too. But there's something about, and I think a lot of us who are in academia or academia adjacent spaces, folks who are in these credentialed ecosystems, there are ways that we're trying to use broken systems to fix things, right? And so what I heard when you talked about, having the book as it's a different conversation with different people, it's an expanded conversation that does slightly different work than a tweet or a blog or even a paper would do, right? Like, so keeping in mind the fluidity, not just in the thoughts that you put in the book, but what the book can do for work, I think is really, really, truly important. And maybe that's a good place to think about, sort of like, what you hope readers get from this book. And I want to forefront, because then Anika and I are going to fangirl about your book individually, but we thought maybe it'd be good to like bring it out to other people. But I want to talk about, like what you hope readers get from the book in general. And then I wanted to talk about a particular instance that's happening on Twitter now, where like actual scientists in the field right now are reckoning with the history of those fields and who's in it. So could you answer that question from both directions?
Yeah, okay, that's a lot. It's a holistic look at the doing of particle physics and cosmology. Depending on the audience, I have different goals. For people who think that popular science is for them, for me, this is very firmly a popular science book. And that was actually one of the things that revealed itself, is I was like, but I always thought when I was in high school that I was going to write a brief history of time. Like I was going to write my own version of that. And here I am, the thing that I've become known for writing about is not that. Even though I'm a columnist for New Scientist, I think a lot of people forget that, right? And I realized I really just wanted to explain to people, I wanted to make the case for particle physics as a form of storytelling, as in line with Sylvia Wynter, the Black woman philosopher. She talks about us as a storytelling species, that particle physics is consistent with who we are as a species, that cosmology is consistent with who we are as a species. So I wanted the popular scientists to see that, but then also people who are interested in popular science to see that, but also to have the experience of learning about what it means to do science, maybe from the perspective of, a brief history of time. Stephen Hawking was not the person to write about what it means to be Black in STEM, to be a woman of color in STEM, to be a queer person in STEM. He was a person to talk about, being physically disabled in STEM. And he did that to effect, right? Carl Sagan, who, wrote Cosmos, which was a very important book for me, again, was not the person to tell the story from that perspective. And so necessarily it's a different story. For people who were like, I don't know if particle physics is my thing, but I'm interested in Black feminist theory, I wanted them to be like, okay, I kind of understand why particle physics can actually be part of my Black feminist framework. So there was a two-direction thing. I don't know if this is like the right analogy, but I've been joking it's a Trojan horse in both directions.
Yes, I am here for all of that. Yes, you better come on with it. That's amazing. And of course there would be layers. Of course there'd be layers there. You can't help it. Let me just say, and we have now firmly entered the fangirl portion of our set. I can't tell you, I'm glad that you talked about the brief history and time as your stepping stone, because it truly is why I love the book so much. Because I did not go to schools that focused in on Black women, queer folk, and the many, many sets of revolutionary theory that were out there about personhood and cultural frameworks. And I just didn't. So I did all of that learning as an adult intentionally to learn more. And I remember, the first time I read Audre Lorde, or the first time I read, actually it was Paula Giddings' book, When and Where I Enter. Like those books were like the first time I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to have a Black woman talking in my head to me about things that feel right in my soul. Like it was intoxicating. And so basically every year when you look at my book list, most of the books I read are Black women because I'm just intoxicated by having Black women in my head. But I didn't have very many examples of Black women reading STEM in my head, reading science in my head, certainly not cosmology in my head. And so, or particle physics. And, we've threatened several times to do research together, but we arrive at particle physics from different directions. Me with the like baby version of trying to understand how jets move, and you from like actually understanding particle physics. But like, it was completely just like mind blowing to me, not because I didn't know you exist, but just because it was such a fantastic experience to have not only your voice in my head as a Black woman in the world, but also as a Black woman scientist in the world. And like, I read the section about quarks and gluons several times, not because I didn't get it, but just because I loved reading about it. Like, I was like, this is amazing. Why aren't all textbooks like this? So it very much accomplishes that sense of popular science, of figuring out how to speak about science from frameworks that are resonant with me. And so I can't express to you what a revolutionary thing it is to be able to read that in a genre that's close to mine, but that I get to learn something from you too. And that's really why we did the VS Gets Lit series, because we want to be able to do that. So that was my fangirl section. It's now Anika's option to talk about what she most loved about your book.
Oh yes, I have been waiting for this. Of course, I knew that we would be talking about Disordered Cosmos on the VS Gets Lit portion of our show. So I explicitly took notes for all of the things that I was just like, this is it. And so I loved reading this book for a lot of the same reasons. And I started following you, Chanda, around the same time that I first discovered Vanguard STEM. And so I often say that Vanguard STEM was the thing that I didn't know that I needed until I found it. And so I had very much the same experience of finding this book that was written by Black women in STEM. And what I wrote in my notes as I was reading through this book is that reading that Disordered Cosmos made my heart swell in a way that I feel I first experienced when I was reading Hidden Figures. And what that feeling was for me was the feeling of seeing myself so clearly written onto a page. And so I also, reading this book, to your point about what you hoped that readers get out of it, I read this as a popular science book. But when a friend asked me to explain it, they're like, oh, is it a memoir? I was like, no, it's a popular science book, but it's like my popular science book. And so that's my fangirl moment.
You guys are trying to get me to cry on a live broadcast. Okay, cut it out. I'm sorry, Anika.
This is what we do. So, I think for us, okay, right. So reading the book, you shared with us that you thought it was going to be sort of summative of your blog post, but what was born of you and of the work was much more profound and really, I guess, true to your heart's call when you were saying that you had wanted to write this, a brief history in time kind of thing. And so I think maybe, because I know we're a little bit over time, we want to be mindful of your time. I think maybe what I'd love for you to just spend a little bit of time talking through is, for the, let's say the science enterprise, the STEM enterprise, those folks that might have pulled from your testimony before, but not had anything to put to it, as they're learning and contending with you as the scientist, you as a cosmologist, you as a theorist, both in feminism and in cosmology, like, do you want them to take, do you want them to take the book and change their lives with it? Like, how do they, I just want to, it's hard for me to articulate this question. Like, I'm thinking, let me tell you what I'm thinking about, see if I can help. I'm thinking about this thread on Twitter that came through, I think it was today, about like being, like realizing that there's this whole heritage of Black scientists that were completely obscured in the history of physics. Is your hope that folks will get motivated to find out all these other participants and explorers and scientists?
Yeah, so I think the example that you're talking about is, and I apologize to the scientist who tweeted it, I don't know his name off the top of my head, a white scientist who is reading Disordered Cosmos, started reading about Joseph Henry, who's basically like the founding father of the Princeton physics department, and learned about Sam Parker, who was a free Black man who worked in Joseph Henry's lab. And by all accounts, like if you read between the lines, it was Sam Parker who was doing the experiments. Henry couldn't function, like the lab shut down the one time Parker got sick. So Henry's the one who's remembered as the great American physicist, and he's remembered as the first American physicist. But the indication is that Sam Parker may actually have been the physicist who was behind the experiments. So he said, I think Sam Parker might have been the first Black physicist. And I said, this is a great thread. I just want to say that this is probably maybe the first recorded example. But the other thing is that the archives are full of these stories that I'll be honest and say, and I'm not trying to knock my colleagues who do like African-American studies, but sometimes I'll pick up a book and they have a tidbit about someone that they just didn't follow that line because like for them, the Black and STEM narrative wasn't the central point they were trying to get at. But it's a spread out there that like I see it in the histories of African-American education, that there were people who like, they had a cosmology book. There are people who taught Edward Boucher, who was the first African-American to receive a PhD in the United States. It was in physics, one of Jedida's predecessors at Yale. And so those stories are out there. Yes, I think that the argument that the scientist made on Twitter today is that electromagnetism has to be taught differently now because like the history of electromagnetism is not what we have been taught in our classrooms. I didn't know who Sam Parker was until I woke up this morning and read that thread. So I'm still learning with everybody else. I think the other thing I want to encourage people to read not for catchphrases and catchwords. Like, for example, I don't know if you all picked up on the fact that I actually don't talk about intersectionality very much in the book. It's not like a central thematic point. And that's not because Kimberly Crenshaw's work isn't important. It's not because it's a framework that hasn't been useful. Jedida and I both started writing about it in astronomy around the same time. But because I found for me, I had reached the point where intersectionality was no longer the framework that was useful for what I wanted to do. And I think it's really important to be flexible in that way and to grow in that way. And so I want to encourage everybody, regardless of identity, to be really careful about getting married to a framework instead of getting married to a goal. The goal is liberation. Our tactics change as we move to that point, right? Like right now, part of liberation is that we need our service members out there helping to get folks vaccinated, and Lieutenant Commander Reese is doing that work, right? I love that. That's liberation for us right now, because like living under the conditions that we've been living in for the last year is not sustainable, right? They change.
No, thank you for making that point. And that's I think it circles back really well to the point you made at the beginning, right? That like the goal is to evolve and to learn and to move frameworks forward. And that's our job as growing, evolving humans. And so I am glad to hear that, and glad to hear you affirming it, not just for yourself, but for others. You know, when we were thinking about, we just wrote our first paper. So we were thinking about our paper, that was one of the things we talked about, that like the notion of constantly evolving is part of what it means to bring both your STEM identity and your interests into one place. That like, oh, well, I think about completely different things in that context. So Chanda, before we take off down this road, because you know we will do this, we've done it before, the three of us. So before we take off on this road, we will stop and invite you back again whenever you have the time, because we're grateful for the time and for your brilliance on many levels. But for today and in context, thank you for writing this book. It's a fantastic book. Look at that, triplets. Exactly. Thank you so much for writing the book and for sharing with us and for being so generous with your ideas for many, many years. I think if the goal is liberation, then your work is central to much of the liberation that's happened now. So on the one hand, you can pick up Chanda's book wherever books are sold, with a priority on independent bookshops and those owned by Black women and people of color. And we're giving away one more. So please do stay tuned for that. And you can find it on Chanda's website. So please do that. Thank you, Chanda, for joining us. You are amazing. We're very thankful.
Thank you for having me.
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Okay. So with that, you have survived. You've made it. Thank you to everybody who has come for the show and hung out with us. And we hope you've gotten information that was helpful to you on a number of different fronts. You can follow us in all the places. You can see everybody on the Twitter machine. We're there. We're always there. And please do let us know if you have questions, comments, thoughts. Otherwise, please subscribe to Vanguard STEM and read our paper, Cite a Sister, Cite Black Women, do all those things. Okay, all right. I think we're done for the night. Thanks, everybody.